Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call, the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today, we welcome Vic Chenoweth, CEO of Tempo. Thanks so much for joining us today, Vic.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about today. This is kind of it kind of takes something that's a little less common in the freight space, but then also kind of blows it up to see kind of the overall trends and other stuff like that. But before we get too far into that, let's get some background on you and how you got started at Tempo.
Great. Appreciate that. So I got started at Tempo just 6 months ago. However, my experience in the space goes back about a decade. So I worked with another company in the space, spent a few years there. And somebody actually asked me pretty recently, sometime last year, kind of what my favorite career experience was. And it was that. And it had as much to do with the space as it does anything else, because it's just really easy for me to equate to the greater purpose of what we do personally, and then genuinely lead that. So I was fortunate when Tempo reached out and alignment was great. Really excited about where we're at as a company and where we're headed.
I absolutely love that. That is kind of the thing, the overall type of personality that supply chain trend tends to attract is those problem solvers, the people that like a little bit of chaos and just kind of like the satisfaction of knowing that they've solved a problem. And I, myself included, I love a good puzzle that you're just like, how are we going to solve this today?
I can appreciate that. I had experience working in source to pay, which is right down the fairway for supplier management and supply freight. So I can very much appreciate it.
Yeah. So give us a quick little background. What is Tempo and kind of what do they do? Because I know you guys are a SaaS company, but just kind of for those that aren't as into stocking companies, what do you guys do a little bit?
Absolutely. So I'll start with our mission, which is really to help organizations align strategy and work with outcomes. And we do that via something that's known as strategic portfolio management. I'm going to refer to it as SPM because it's a little bit easier to roll off the tongue. But that allows us under that construct to achieve that mission, aligning strategy and work with outcomes. We do that by enabling teams to define, connect, and deliver more effectively. And when I think about how that applies to the world, the situations, it's really about recognizing that the world is dynamic and being able to address the dynamic nature of the world. The second piece is governance. So we all have to deal with governance as well. And so we have to address both the dynamic nature of the markets and the worlds we live in and the governance. And we need agility to do that. SPM is what allows what I'm going to call kind of modern and or more mature organizations to achieve that. And when I say modern and or more mature, it's not a size thing. It's really just about thinking forward, kind of the most forward thinking organizations. And so to put that in perspective, 9 of the top 10 telecom companies we work with, 9 of the top 10 car companies we work with, half of the food manufacturers in the world we work with, over half of the Fortune 500 we work with as well. And this applies to innovation as well as delivery. And that's really where the supply chain comes in.
So I guess when you talk about these companies that are, like you said, 9 of the main of category, over half of the food manufacturers, what are some of those common traits that you're seeing among those companies that are, maybe whether it's their tendency to innovate or the adoption of technology or other stuff like that? What are some of those key traits that you're seeing in those wildly successful companies?
So it's a combination of folks who are thinking about innovation and having to deal with agility. So even if you're not innovating, you're just running a business, so to speak, the world is changing around you and you have to constantly deal with that from an agility perspective. And so a supplier disappears. What do we do with that? A supplier is just not available anymore, or it went up 200% because of tariffs, whatever the case may be. That there's constantly chaos thrown at businesses, and being able to deal with that chaos is probably number one. It's probably number two or three at worst case on leadership's kind of plate of things to worry about and prioritize. We enable we enable our customers to address those things more effectively, and we do it also in just the planning process, but more importantly, the continuous planning process. And as technology has evolved over time, planning processes and cycles have shortened up. I don't know a lot of people who just do annual planning anymore. You do quarterly forecasting or monthly or weekly or daily in some instances. And as that trend has continued, SPM has become increasingly important.
I think that like so I mean I can't speak for all companies and all shippers in the world, but I do think that those you'll kind of have maybe your annual plan, if you will, of like, okay, we're expecting to do roughly, let's say like 1 million units this year. But then when it comes to actually like planning and producing those units, I find that like you said, it has kind of moved to almost a day to day, or at least like we're not making an overall plan. It's more kind of specific because we've seen it even in the rise of, we've seen mini bids and like other project bids come out. And so it's kind of like, okay, looking at our production facility, look at our capacity, we see that we have the space for these 100 units to make this week. So let's go ahead and do a sprint to get like this whole section done before we get maybe into a higher production season with a different product that we have. And so I think that like because people have gotten smarter with or I guess more agile would probably be the correct word here. But I think that like the more people are able to kind of flex and change and adapt to what's happening. I mean, we saw it in the pandemic when there was just so much chaos happening that it kind of became a you need to plan for the worst but hope for the best. And I think really making sure that, okay, if this supplier is out, then maybe we pull forward some of the other stuff that we have on hand. So that way we can figure out what to do with this supplier, but still keep our production lines running. And I think that that is something that is only going to be a skill that needs to be kind of honed and sharpened as we kind of move into the future.
I would agree. And you think about like agility. Agility is really about looking ahead at the possibilities and the scenario analyses and planning for them, knowing that there's one thing certain with a plan: it's wrong. Like I've never seen a plan that wasn't wrong in some form or another. And it's usually over time, it gets more and more wrong. And the faster things are changing and evolving, similarly, it gets more wrong. And so, really critical in any sort of execution of a plan is having scenario analysis, which leads to the ability to have agility and go, hey, we know that things are going to change. Can we respond to them? Which ones are likely to change? Let's make certain we can respond to those more quickly than others. And let's also just think overall about our ability to respond to changes. So SPM helps with that. There's lots of things that help with that, quite frankly. But it's a framework for being able to do that. The other piece that you kind of alluded to there is there's multiple parties involved and multiple parties that use different tools to collaborate and work and plan their work. And so bringing those different collaborative work tools or methodologies together is also critically important. And that's a fundamental capability under that SPM umbrella.
Absolutely. Because I mean, it's something that saying that like, oh, we just don't do that, or that's not something that we handle, that's not really like an option anymore. Or like, oh, we're not equipped to handle that. I'm not saying that, everybody needs to be equipped for every solution all the time. Like, you don't need to constantly be like almost disaster planning of like, okay, well, what if a tornado hits the production facility tomorrow? What does that look like? You don't need to necessarily like have an answer for all of that, but you at least need to have some sort of backup plan in place where like, okay, if something happens at this site, how do my other sites pick up the pick up the slack, and how do we do that? Or if this entire carrier goes bankrupt tomorrow, do I have another one that I can kind of shift stuff to in the time being until I can get it sorted out? That's not to say that every day you should come in and just start planning for disasters and horrible things to happen, but it is something that I think to not think about and to not plan for would be a huge miss and potentially lead to some negative implications for your organization.
I couldn't agree more. And I think if you step back in time, companies oftentimes win after that, and there's still plenty that do it this way with heroes. There's somebody at the company who just knows how to problem solve and deal with it. So when we have a problem, we're going to call in Mary because Mary knows how to do that. She is our hero. As companies grow and scale, they can't do that. And so what they need are tools and frameworks and principles that allow everybody to act similarly. And so the organization becomes that hero, so to speak, to their customers, but they're not single resource or two resource dependent. They have tools and frameworks and so on and so forth in place. And that's what we try to do, right? That's what we're doing there, is to help them do that, establish what they're trying to do, make sure it's connected to what their capabilities are and what the market requires, and then work with them around a scenario analysis, or really enable them to do this, so that they can be agile and be ready to adapt to whatever comes their way, because ultimately that's what you have to do.
And I think that like it's because it's hard to it's kind of like it's a problem that we run into for like in kind of levy building, you know, which to take a quick little side trip off the supply chain route, but it's hard to come to a, for example, a city and say, hey, you know, you have a levy that could or could not fail in the next 20 years. Shouldn't you spend a bunch of money to fix it? And I think that's kind of almost the approach here with, you know, where do we even start when it becomes time for us to kind of be more resilient, be more agile, is okay, well, you need to plan for something that could or could not happen in the future. And if you're already strapped and your team is kind of, you know, working at their limits, they can't necessarily take a step back and say, okay, well, this is if a truck breaks down or if this company goes out or this carrier or this shipper, then what do we do? This is our backup plan. It's kind of also, it's hard to prioritize that because like I've been on that side where you're like, okay, well, we need to figure out what to do. We need to have backup plans in place. And you're like, okay, well, which of these fires that are currently on fire would you like me to not put out in order to deal with an imaginary fire that could or could not happen in the future? So I guess how do you get those that maybe are kind of stuck in that spot of like, okay, well, I have real problems that I need to put out today, but also I need to plan for problems in the future. What's your kind of advice for balancing those demands? Because you know, this supply chain, heaven forbid anything actually, heaven forbid we go one day without something going wrong.
Great question. So, a couple of things. One is every individual out there, every leader, they're going to be more knowledgeable about your business and industry than me. So I'm not going to try to pretend that I know how to fix in a certain industry's challenges one way or the other. Um, what we do to help customers with that is tooling that does scenario analysis for them, and you can do basically continuous planning. And so we can do this at the beginning of the year, going, hey, here are the most likely risks we have. How do we scenario analyze for that and be ready for these things that have a reasonable, or maybe they're unlikely, but there's such an impact, we need to be ready for that. And then we can continue to do that. What's typically difficult without a tool like Tempo is manually doing that. And so, and we can do that from a scenario analysis, and we can also do it from a deployment. So, like when a customer uses one of our tools to go do a scenario analysis, and they go, "Hey, all right, we've settled on what we're going to do because the risk profile of this and the investment profile and so on and so forth aligns as optimally as anything else with the outcomes we're trying to achieve, recognizing perfection is not a reality." How do we then go do it? Well, that scenario analysis already has the resource deployment in there, and it's 95% accurate. There is a person element that needs to get on top of that and go, hey, that's nice. You've got this 95%, but we need Mary to do that because she actually knows how to do that, versus you've got Vic assigned here and he doesn't know how to do that. And so, but that type of tooling helps companies do it. And again, at scale, because going back to something I said earlier, relying on heroes to continue to move the business forward is a very difficult place to be, and you're on a bit of a precipice, and you want to make sure you're on the right side of that precipice, not the wrong side of that precipice, and we want to take that out. Like when I think about scaling a business, and this is just me as an operator regardless, I want to not be needed, right? And so the most effective leaders out there, I think one of the things they have an edict is, I need to not be needed, which means the company needs to be able to do this stuff without me, and that's pushed down to the next layer of leadership. The next layer of leadership, which means you have automation, you have processes, you have frameworks, in order to scale that, and that meets the business needs, which ultimately meets customer needs.
And I think that's a really interesting point, is that it's you, not to say that you want to like not like automate yourself out of a job, but you also want to like have that balance of saying like, okay, well, you don't need me to run the day to day. You don't need me to make decisions on what carrier are we using for shipper A and shipper B. Like, you don't need me for that. But what I can do is I can work on these, what happens if. And so that way, if if situation C happens, here's a plan that falls into place. So that way, in theory, your operations, the people doing the day to day work, they won't necessarily feel that pain, that struggle, that panic of, oh my gosh, what do I do? It might just be like 10 minutes of, what just happened? And then you're like, oh, situation C happened. Here's the solution. If you could just kind of shift over here, that'd be great. And we'll work on fixing whatever that was. Um, and I think that that is kind of really important, not to like go down the crazy, "Oh, you need to be prepared if the world ends" kind of thing, but you do kind of need to be prepared if you have a supplier randomly go out, if you have a carrier have half their trucks put out of service during road check week. Like, those are things that are going to happen. Or if you have a supplier that maybe lives in the middle of I don't know if Hurricane Alley is a thing, but I like to think it is. If we have Tornado Alley, certainly we have Hurricane Alley. But if you know that you have someone that gets flooded or hit by hurricanes every year, then you say, hey, maybe we just ask you to have it come out of a different facility in October, because of the chances of a hurricane hitting you are very high. And I think that it's just so much easier to have these plans ahead of time than, even if it takes a little bit more time to set it up. I think it just only contributes to the overall success compared to just kind of constantly chasing a fire.
Absolutely correct. There's 2 points I'll add to that. One is one of the things we just talked about is enable and empower. Ultimately, that's what you're trying to do is we want to enable and empower people with tools and processes which come together and methodologies for them to go and deal with that stuff. The second piece is no matter what scenario analysis we do or anybody does, things are going to come along that weren't analyzed and planned for. But as the muscle has been built to address these things, you can use the same tools to go after those. Like I'm sure there were plenty of folks caught off guard by the sheer volume of tariffs that were proposed and the implications to business and supply chain and so on and so forth. And so it wasn't, hey, let's turtle up and hope for the best. It was, let's actually look at the scenario analysis. We've done this before, and we have confidence and competence. And the combination of those two things, we can go achieve what we need to achieve. It may mean we have to adjust customer expectations, but they'll understand the why of it, and we'll be able to understand the why of it and how we're going to close those gaps. I think you saw the most kind of effective companies out there are able to get through that bar effectively or over that hurdle effectively. And those that were tested probably have built some muscle since then and have gotten a little bit better.
Well, I think it does kind of, we've, because after the pandemic, everyone's like, oh, we need to build resilient, we need to build agile supply chains. And then to have that tested so quickly and so aggressively when PTO and tariffs were coming, it's just, you kind of have to go like, I hope we did it. And that's like a really good pressure test. And now we've got some time to kind of reevaluate that. And so for those that might be reevaluating it, or if they're like, we're tired of being on the back foot a lot, we want to kind of stay ahead of this and get ahead of it. What's your kind of beginning piece of advice for those looking to maybe, whether it's build a more agile supply chain or kind of be a little bit more prepared for the unknown? What's your biggest piece of advice for those looking to start?
There's probably multiple pieces of advice there, so the single biggest may be challenged. I think just recognition, hey, they're past the first step. Our business is dynamic, things are changing, and we want to continue to grow and support our customers. That kind of focus on the greater purpose of the company, which is almost invariably some element of how do you help our customers be successful, is the starting point. It just sounds like in this example, somebody's already there. And then once you're there, you're going to look at the business and go, all right, where's our biggest risks? And how do we start to adjust those? And how do we connect dots across the entire ecosystem so that we can do that effectively together? Because it takes a village, so to speak, to make that work. An individual isn't going to make that work. So you put in the tools and the processes so that the village can work effectively together. And particularly in today's distributed world, that means collaborative work management tools, and which is not what we do, but we sit on top of those at Tempo and then connect those and make sure they're connected in a way that no matter how people work. So at any given company, you're going to have people that work agile. You're going to have people that work with a pen and paper and notepads and sticks and whatnot. But ultimately, more and more people are some kind of digital, connecting all that digital together so that people can work effectively and you can see, hey, these programs are interrelated, these projects are interrelated, and just making that making the complex simple is probably what I would suggest that everyone needs to do in that global space, is just being able to connect the dots on here's what people are doing, how they're collaborating. We're going to enable them to work and make decisions locally. We're going to bring it together to optimize globally. Because the reality is, hey, Mary may be working in St. Louis, and in St. Louis, she was able to figure out this thing, and how do we then propagate that other places? We can learn from each other. So that type of connected system um, allows a company to grow more effectively and get better at pace. And that's the type of thing, again, that we at Tempo, that's what we try to do for our customers, is be able to put in a place and a framework of tooling that enables them to do that. There's probably other advice too. That was a bit of a self-serving one because that's how we fit in it, but it's also what I understand.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense because you don't want to necessarily, like you said, if you have all these people working collaboratively, whether it's your suppliers, your carriers, members within your organization, if you don't want to have it all be like on someone's notebook on their desk. So that way, like if you're out of town and you're like, oh well, like the main point of contact for that supplier, their phone number is written on a notepad on my desk. Like we don't need that. Because you can't like call someone at the office to be like, can you go into this drawer and grab this phone number and hope that it's the right one? That's just not like a long-term solution. That's probably a really bad example, but you kind of get the point of you don't want all that institutional knowledge because then for some reason, if that person were to leave, if your hero were to leave the organization for whatever reason, then all of that institutional knowledge goes with them. Whereas if you can kind of pick their brain more or less while they're still there and get those plans in place and, how we've been handling it as an organization, if we just get that nailed down, it really kind of, I don't want to say like future proofs it, but it really kind of gives you the extra layer of security of knowing, okay, well, if we lose someone for whatever reason, like our company, like we're not going to, like we're still going to know how to handle some of these severe situations.
I think that's right. And by the way, my experience with these hero types, which they're fantastic to have, is they want to help people become heroes. They want to not be needed to do that. And going back to something you said earlier, hey, it's not about processing yourself out of a job. It sort of is out of processing yourself out of tasks so you can work on the bigger, more important parts of the job. And I would say 9 out of 10, something like that, of those heroes want the organization to be able to do that without having to call on them every single time. Because part of it is they're going to be afraid they're not available, they're not around, and most most employees, most of us who work, which is almost everybody, we want to be engaged. Like we want to care about the company and care about the greater purpose and our customers. And when we do, we want to make sure they're successful. Somebody who's a hero type like that has that mentality. They're highly engaged and they want to make sure we don't, as a company, drop that. And so good news is you can pull them into it and help them solve for those problems and being able to enable and empower the rest of the organization to do that effect.
Oh, 100%. Because if I'm a hero type, I want to be able to go on vacation and not get 700 phone calls while I'm gone, or think that everything's just going to get messed up and I'm going to go back to like a wildfire when I get back into the office. But that being said, not necessarily along the lines of a wildfire, but Vic, there's a question that everybody comes on the show has to answer. So, if you could build a house out of any food, what would you choose?
That's a tough one. I have to decide if I'm going to choose for flavor or for utility. I'm going to go with utility in this
Okay.
instance. I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to go with bread. Um, I feel like with bread, I can have like a nice thick insulated wall if I want to. I can kind of go on top and I think I can structurally get it work, kind of interlocking it. I could also have thin walls if I wanted to as well and kind of build more lightweight type stuff. Flooring's going to be a little suspect.
Well,
Can be crispy on the outside, soft on the inside as well. That sounds good. So I'm going to go with the bread is going to be the basis of my home that I'm building with food. I hope, just transparently, I never have to do that. But thank you for the question.
I mean, if you do have to do it, I think one of the like day old baguettes or like the 2 day old baguettes that are basically like hard as stone, I think that you could probably build a pretty decent structure out of that if push came to shove. But I do like the bread approach. A big problem for ants, but pest control is not a thing in the world of imaginary food houses.
I'm pretty sure that any home made of any food is going to have some infestation challenges.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
my home's not going to do very well in the rain either, so this is very much a dry climate option.
Yeah. And not in the wilderness because bears and raccoons would love a bread house.
Good news, I can also make the materials myself if I had to.
There you go. Just get you like a Costco bag size of flour and you're ready to go.
Or maybe it's gluten free, who knows?
There you go. All right, Vic, if anyone has any, good floor plans for a bread house, or if they have any questions on kind of where to get started, how to build up some contingency plans in an agile supply chain, where can they find you outside the show?
Well, you can go find me at tempo.io is probably the easiest place to find me. And then if they want to follow up with you and find me directly, I'm more than happy to chat with them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and we'll see you next time.
Likewise, thanks so much for having me.
You can find Check All the Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkall. See you on the internet.